There are lines in the Peruvian desert that stretch for miles. A hummingbird with wings spanning 300 feet. A spider the size of a football field. A monkey. A condor. Spirals. Geometric shapes. Thousands of them. Carved into the earth 2,000 years ago by people who could never see them from above. For decades, archaeologists asked, why would a civilization spend generations creating art they could never fully witness? The answer turned out to be darker than anyone imagined. They weren't creating art. They were praying. Desperate prayers to gods they hoped would bring back the rain. Because their world, a thriving civilization in one of the driest places on Earth, was dying. Slowly. Invisibly. From climate change they couldn't understand and couldn't stop. The Nazca Lines aren't messages to the gods. They're messages to us. A warning written in stone. By a civilization that watched their climate destroy them. And then disappeared. The civilization that shouldn't have existed. The Nazca culture flourished in the coastal desert of Peru, from around 200 BCE to 600 CE. This is one of the driest places on Earth. Some areas receive less than an inch of rain per year. And yet, the Nazca built cities. They supported thousands of people. They created art, pottery, textiles. They built an irrigation system so sophisticated that some of it still functions today. How? They mastered water. The Nazca engineered underground aqueducts called puquios that tapped into aquifers deep beneath the desert. These weren't simple wells. They were complex systems, with spiral openings that allowed wind to push water through underground channels. Engineering that seems almost impossible for a people without metal tools. But it worked. For centuries. It worked. The desert bloomed. And then the climate changed. The lines appear. Around 200 CE, the Nazca began creating the lines. Not all at once. Over generations. They removed the reddish pebbles covering the desert floor, exposing the lighter soil beneath. Creating images so large you can only see them fully from the air. A hummingbird. A spider. A monkey. Geometric shapes stretching for miles. For years, people theorized alien landing strips, ancient astronauts, astronomical calendars. But recent research tells a different story. The lines align with water sources. Many of them point toward the mountains where water originates. Others mark underground aquifers, and they were created during a period when the climate was becoming more erratic. Droughts lasting years. Floods when rain did come. The delicate balance the Nazca had maintained for centuries breaking down. The lines weren't art. They were ritual. Pathways for ceremonies asking the gods for water. Physical prayers carved into the earth. The desperate science. Here's what makes the Nazca story tragic. They were brilliant engineers. They understood hydrology in ways that amaze modern scientists. But when the climate shifted, when El Niño events became more severe, when droughts lasted longer, when the aquifers they depended on began to fail, their engineering couldn't save them. So they turned to ritual. They created more lines. Bigger lines. More elaborate ceremonies. Archaeological evidence shows the lines were walked during rituals. People followed these massive figures in processions, offering sacrifices, begging for rain. The more desperate they became, the more lines they created. It's heartbreaking. A civilization that had mastered the science of surviving in a desert, reduced to walking giant spirals in the sand, hoping the gods would notice. What the climate record shows. Modern climate science can now read what happened to the Nazca. Ice cores from the Andes, ocean sediment cores, tree rings, all tell the same story. Around 200 CE, the climate in coastal Peru became more variable. El Niño events, massive disruptions to weather patterns, caused by ocean temperature changes, became more frequent and severe. Some years brought catastrophic floods. Most years brought nothing. The Nazca civilization was built on predictable water sources. Underground aquifers recharged by steady seasonal rainfall in the mountains. When that pattern broke, their entire system began to fail. No amount of engineering could fix it, because the problem wasn't local. It was global. Ocean temperatures were changing. Atmospheric patterns were shifting. The Nazca had no way to know this. No way to understand that the droughts weren't punishment from the gods, just physics. Planetary scale changes completely beyond their control. The collapse. By 600 CE, the Nazca civilization was gone, not destroyed by conquest, not wiped out by disease. They abandoned their cities. The puquios, those brilliant underground aqueducts, were left to fill with sand. The art, the pottery, the textiles stopped being made. The lines remained, visible from above, a record of desperation preserved by the same dry climate that killed them. What happened to the people? They likely migrated. to the highlands, to areas with more reliable water. They survived. But their civilization didn't. The Nazca culture, everything they'd built, everything they'd achieved, collapsed. Not because they were primitive, not because they were stupid, because the climate changed and they couldn't adapt fast enough. The warning in the lines. The Nazca Lines are often presented as one of history's great mysteries. Ancient alien theorists love them. They're visually stunning. They're on UNESCO's World Heritage List. But the real story is much more disturbing. The Nazca Lines are a monument to climate desperation. A civilization that did everything right, brilliant engineering, sustainable practices, careful resource management, and still collapsed when the climate changed beyond their capacity to adapt. This is the lesson the Nazca left behind. Advanced engineering isn't enough. Sustainability isn't enough. Even perfect adaptation to your environment isn't enough. If the environment itself changes, the modern parallel, we're facing the same thing. Different scale, different technology. Same fundamental problem. The Nazca built their civilization around predictable water sources. We've built ours around predictable climate patterns. Agriculture depends on reliable rainfall and growing seasons. Cities exist where they are because of predictable water supplies. Coastal infrastructure assumes sea levels will stay roughly constant. Supply chains assume transportation routes will remain viable. All of it built on the assumption that the climate won't change dramatically. But it is changing. Faster than the Nazca faced. On a global scale, and like the Nazca, we're very good at engineering solutions to the problems we understand. We can build better infrastructure. We can develop drought-resistant crops. We can engineer water systems. But engineering has limits. When the entire planetary system shifts, when ocean temperatures rise, when weather patterns become chaotic, when the baseline conditions change, engineering can only delay the problem. It can't solve it. What we can learn. The Nazca teach us three things. First, collapse can be gradual. The Nazca didn't disappear overnight. Their civilization declined over centuries. It was slow enough that each generation probably thought they could manage, until they couldn't. Second, ritual can't replace science. When the Nazca's engineering solutions failed, they turned to ritual. They created more lines. They performed more ceremonies. We do the same. We debate. We make pledges. We create symbolic gestures. But if we're not addressing the fundamental problem, the changing climate itself, we're just walking in circles in the fundamental problem. Desert. Third, local solutions can't fix global problems. The Nazca were brilliant at managing water in their local environment. But when the problem was planetary, El Niño cycles driven by ocean temperatures, local solutions weren't enough. Same for us. Individual actions matter. Local policies help. But climate change is planetary. It requires planetary solutions. The lines remain. Today, you can still see the Nazca lines. The hummingbird, the spider, the monkey. Preserved by the same dry climate that helped destroy the civilization that created them. They're beautiful. But they're also terrifying. Because they're proof that a civilization can do everything right, brilliant engineering, sustainable practices, careful adaptation, and still collapse. When the climate shifts beyond their ability to respond, the Nazca carved their prayers into the earth, hoping someone would answer. No one did. The lines remain. A warning, not from the gods, from history. The question, if the Nazca could see us now, see our cities, our technology, our global civilization, what would they tell us? Probably this: don't wait for the gods to save you. Don't assume your engineering will always be enough. Don't think that because you've survived past crises, you'll survive the next one. Climate change isn't punishment. It's physics, and it doesn't care how advanced you are. The Nazca lines are still there, visible from above. A message written in stone, by people who ran out of time. The question is, are we listening?